I think of this in terms of an interview 21st century Charlie might do of 20th century Charlie as a young attorney 40 years ago. I think I would have asked, well, do you think you get to know your clients? And I would have said, well, I think so. And then today's Charlie would ask, well, do you know which of your clients ever attempted suicide? And I'd go, no, I don't know that. Well, would you know of those who did, what the circumstances were, or what help they ever received? I'd have to say no. Do you know which ones were sexually molested as kids or beaten? No. Which ones are suffering from PTSD? Which ones have nightmares and intrusive thoughts? In this day and age of better technology, we have a way of making this. It's not just that Defense Map is free, but the time is free.
From the very moment a defendant is involved in this system, someone else has control over their story. They want to define that person solely by the crime they may have committed. You have a sentencing date set, and the stakes are high. Both lawyer and client need to do everything in their power to prepare. But the question is, are you ready? I'm Doug Passon. I'm a 25-year defense lawyer, a sentencing consultant, and an award-winning documentary filmmaker. In Set for Sentencing, I'm going across disciplines and outside the box to help both lawyer and client expand their perspective, build on their skills, and get real results in the form of significantly reduced sentences. All of this in service to one goal: to bring more fairness, more compassion, and more justice to the sentencing process. So, are you ready? Then let's get set for sentencing. Hey everybody, this is Doug Passon coming to you alive, but not very live, from Studio 3553. With us today to help us get set for sentencing is a gentleman named Charlie Asher. He's an attorney and, among other things, the creator of Defense Map. The website is defensemap.com. What is Defense Map? It is a free and powerful and unique tool to dig deep, connect with your client, uncover their story, any mitigation, and really help develop a relationship with your client, and most importantly, a defense for your client, a mitigation theory for your client. It helps you represent your client in an unprecedented way. And so I've been using this tool myself for probably 3 or 4 years now. Time's moving very fast. So I'm a huge believer in this. And so I wanted to bring Charlie on to talk to us about Defense Map. So I'm so glad that you are here. Before I let you start talking, I do want to just kind of give you some of Charlie's bio. He is an AV rated attorney with a concentration in criminal defense. Most of Charlie's professional time in recent years has been dedicated to leading teams building free, groundbreaking resources for better legal service to the public. This broad range of resources can be seen on the Asher family's website, which is freedom22.org. Charlie's joined in these efforts by his wife, Barb, who's a social worker, and the Ashers also run a family foundation that was created in 1997 with a focus on problem solving in divorce and other family cases and improvements in primary and secondary education. So our focus today of these many amazing free resources that Charlie has developed is, like I said, defensemap.com. This is a game-changing way of massively expanding the information defendants can share with their attorneys. The website's bilingual. There are separate versions for adults and juveniles. There's separate tracks for new cases, post-conviction cases, parole, clemency, sentence reduction, you name it. So, Charlie, first, give me your origin story with regards to, well, welcome and thank you for being here. I would love for you to tell me sort of the genesis of how Defense Map came into being. What's your origin story creating this amazing tool?
Yeah, Doug, I was always of the opinion that weren't finding out enough about our clients, and it wasn't really the attorney's fault. There's too much to ask. There are too many impediments to our communication with our clients. I felt that practicing law, and since I've gone into this not-for-profit field and creating resources to try to help other attorneys, I see it now. And I'd ask anybody who has any doubt about that to take a look at some of your amazing mitigation videos. The one that I saw recently for a young man charged in the January 6th riots, but bringing out the backstory, I would say 90% of that, very often the attorney, unless he or she is an unusually patient person, a very unusually psychologically minded person, and a person with amazing resources, extra hours to sit and almost move in with the client at their home, is not going to find out about. So I was always concerned about this as an attorney. And as I look at the problems of a Q&A, which is what we learned in law school, we'll sit with the client, pepper them with questions, write down their answers, and in 20 minutes or maybe an hour or maybe 3 hours, you're going to know everything. It just is not possible. And I do want to emphasize, I don't consider this the lawyer's fault. Sometimes, by the way, I think of this in terms of an interview 21st century Charlie might do of 20th century Charlie as a young attorney 40 years ago. I think I would have asked, well, do you think you get to know your clients? And I would have said, well, I think so. And then today's Charlie would ask, well, do you know which of your clients ever attempted suicide? And I'd go, no, I don't know that. Well, would you know of those who did, what the circumstances were, or what help they ever received? I'd have to say no. Do you know which ones were sexually molested as kids or beaten? No. By whom and to what effect, or what help they did or didn't get? No, I don't. Which ones are suffering from PTSD? Which ones have nightmares and intrusive thoughts, and over what? And who's seen people stabbed or shot and so forth? I'd have to say no, I don't know any of these things. But in this day and age of better technology, we have a way of making this. It's not just that Defense Map is free, but the time is free. The client actually can share much more in the privacy and the and confidentiality of working alone, and the safety of that space and answering these questions. So that was the idea. And, I'm thrilled that I wish we had more lawyers who had the time to take a look at it and interest to take a look at it. But those who have taken a look at it are just blown away. And, you've mentioned this yourself, but many other lawyers, very often it's with some cases that they've handled for a long time. Then they learn about Defense Map. They send clients to it and they go, I've represented this guy for a year. I didn't know about this. I didn't know that this person had been stabbed himself. I'd seen his mother beaten and choked to unconsciousness by boyfriends that she had somewhere. So that's the origin. I'd like us to have something comparable to the resources the police and prosecutors have. And I'd like us to have some resources with our middle class and poor clients that wealthy clients have to spend, endless hours getting to know their story. And that's the origin, I'd say.
I love it. I love it. And I think you touched on, in my experience, that is the heart of the problem. And it is that lawyers don't get to truly know their clients.
Right.
And sometimes I'm a little hard on law school because I feel like they teach us how to be very analytical, very data-driven, issue, rule, application, conclusion. How do we dissect this case? And that programs us as lawyers to get right into the case, the facts, the police report. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we're going to defend this case. And we don't ever even sit down and just say, how are you? What's going on? What makes you tick? And so I'm going to do a quick screen share for the YouTube folks, because your homepage says it all to me. And it says, congratulations on having an attorney who wants to really know your story in order to speak up for you. So anybody who knows me knows that it's all about the story for me. And your job as an attorney is to convince a decision maker to connect with your client and to care about what happens to them. And the only way that you do that is by telling their compelling story. So that's a fact right off the top that's often lost on lawyers. But our experience is that attorneys with this dedication share at least two things in common. One, an awareness that the deck is stacked against the defense, absolutely. And two, a commitment to fight back. A system that's supposed to be a balance of forces between the prosecution and defense, quoting the Wardius v. Oregon case in '73. So, that's what we're trying to do here is bring balance back to the system, which I love. And I'll tell you what, before I would love for you to just sort of dig into talk about generally the content of the map and what went into it in terms of thought and time and expertise to develop this. How do you come up with these questions? I will tell my listeners, this is intense. It's a very, very in-depth questionnaire that clients fill out, and it takes a long time. And I want to read to you an email that I got from someone who I just finished up a case with them, and they did the map, and it was like every map I've ever done, incredibly useful. But I thought his comments were kind of enlightening. He said, I spent about 3 hours on it today, and I'm about 30% finished. He said, I don't mean this in a bad way, but sometimes I felt like I was writing my obituary. It's difficult. I found the reflection to be pretty tough, which to me shows how deep this process goes, and how meaningful it can be to shed light on all of these, these aspects of the story. So, and you cannot get to the truth of the story without doing that hard work. And what I want to stress is this isn't just about getting the data. There's a process that my clients go through in sitting with themselves and thinking about their life and going all the way back to the beginning and really giving thought and consideration to this, that something inside of them shifts. So it's not just about me getting the information. It's about them getting perspective, big picture perspective on their life that they never had before.
Yeah.
And it's intense. It can be transformative. So tell me, just give me, I know you can't go through the 3 hours of defense, but just generally, what are the categories and how did you come up with them? Who and what was developed? Who was involved in the development of this? And that's a lot. But go ahead.
Well, I worked in reentry programs, citizens coming back from prison. We had a lot of them go through beta tests of this. What areas do you see as important? Barb Epsley hates when I say this. She's my wife, life partner, best friend, and a retired social worker and an emotionally brilliant person. She hates when I say that she's the heart and soul of almost everything that we do, but she's been, day to day, minute to minute on every single question that we put in here. But there are 23 topics that we begin very interestingly, and we make the defense map kind of conversational. And it starts out by asking, what's most on your mind? I'll have specific questions coming up, talking about the details of your case, but what's most on your mind? And then it goes through everything from the charged events, the client's opinion about what contributed to it, whether it's something inside of them, could be false allegations. What brought that about, if that's the case? But also what their reflections are about their participation in it, their feelings about any victims. Then it goes into questions about their childhood, any deficits, traumas in their childhood. We take histories about school, work, health, military, and counseling, how they use their free time now. We ask questions about post-traumatic stress disorder without using that term, but are there things that keep you up at night? Are there nightmares that wake you up? Are there intrusive thoughts? And they can go through there's a complete section about that. We go over 12 important assets in their lives to see which ones might be missing and which ones are actually present in their lives and which ones are only partly present. And they have a chance to explain all of those. We ask questions about their psychological state. Have they ever attempted suicide? What were the circumstances? what indications do they have of depression, thoughts about hurting themselves, thoughts about hurting others, and about 10 other areas of psychological and emotional issues that may be in their lives. What are their most positive relationships? What are the most negative ones? Who are the people that they feel like they should be gravitating toward and using, and who are the people and relationships that they really should end and separate themselves from? What addictive patterns have been harming their lives, and in what specific ways? There's a section that asks them about what changes would you like to make in your life. And this is something that I wish I'd done more when I was actively practicing law. I still do pro bono work, but it's not my full-time work anymore by any stretch. But we ask about 8 specific areas. What changes might you want to make in your relationships, in your work and work skills, alcohol and drug use, ways of handling problems, use of any personal strengths, and so forth and so on. We ask specifically about heroic deeds and giving acts and other things that we can use in mitigation. And I think I missed out, Doug, on so much. As I look back, I mean, these defense maps would have utterly revolutionized. People always said you care so much about your clients and you get to know them so much. But I would say that looking back, I knew a fraction of what I should have known. We ask about who are the mitigation witnesses? You have some of them up there right now. Who are they? What is their stand? What is your relationship with them? What's their standing in the community? And what do they have to share about you? And what help could they be in your life? A lot of people know, well, if I got hold of my old football coach, he always worried about me and always wanted. I think he would reignite a mentor relationship with me and so forth. And then we ask some closing questions about what is there anything else you'd like to share. So it's quite comprehensive. It's easily doable though, and people can log on and off as much as they like. I think a typical amount of time is like 2 to 4 hours, but like that one client whose reflections you were just reading, there's some people who spend much more, and they do it in the safety and privacy of their own time. And I want to say one other thing, and I don't want to go on too long here, but what you said is so true. It's not like sharing when you go to the doctor and say, the doctor said, well, where does it hurt? And how would you rate it from 0 to 10? The client really is discovering something about himself or herself in the course of this. Lawyers, for the most part, are still middle class and upper middle class people, very often representing people from working class or poverty class people, not always, but and these people do not go to counseling necessarily. They don't sit around and do a lot of self-examination, self-help work, and so forth. This may be, for many of them, is the first time that they've examined what has been going on in their life. But that can be equally true for very wealthy people who just have been putting away, ignoring the elephant in the room. So
Yeah.
it's a safe place to look at, to examine for oneself, and then to share with a trusted professional, the defense attorney, much, much more than what's been the case in the past.
In terms of balancing the scales, one of the things that I think is so powerful about this is it's a mitigation tool. We don't all have access to the resources such as mitigation specialists, investigators, paralegals, legal assistants, these folks that can kind of gather this information and things like that. So this is just free. And it takes no time of the attorney. It takes no resource of the attorney. And then once the attorney gets it back, you can actually use this as a tool to get some of those resources. In other words, do you need to get the court to fund a psych evaluation? Well, guess what? I have this information, that information, sleepless, depression, suicide, whatever it may be, to say these are the things I know now, and you can build on that. The other thing is that I think when I did my first map with you, Charlie, I came to you a little cocky. It's saying, this is my bread and butter, is getting the story out of a client. And I pride myself on being the lawyer who takes that time and spends them and learns their story. So I was thinking, well, I'm not sure what this maps can do for me that I haven't already been doing myself. And lo and behold, I did it. And I did get more information than I had previously gotten with this particular client. And so, uh, one of the things that it gave me beyond data was a narrative thread.
Yeah.
And in this particular, I don't know if you remember this particular client, but he was charged with an aggravated assault, and he joined the army right after 9/11. He was 18 years old, and never been in trouble a day in his life as an 18-year-old young man. Came from a great family. His father was a pastor and just the rock of his life, and he went to fight overseas, and he came back in really bad shape. And he was drinking, he was using drugs, he had PTSD, the things that he saw, and
Right.
had experienced over there. Nobody should have to in a lifetime, right? So he battled with addiction, and his father was his rock, and his father got sick. He had Alzheimer's, and my client was caring for him.
Ah,
And once his father had to go into assisted living, he was no longer living with his dad and caring for his dad. So he had kind of nothing to keep him grounded. And really, that's when he really spun off the rails, and he got this very serious criminal case. But in his defense map, he had written about his father in a way that I had never previously understood the role his dad played in his life and the role it played when he was out of his life.
yes.
But he had talked about, and he wrote this: I will never forget the last words that my father told me. He told me, and it was right before his father passed away. He went to see him before he died. He told me he loved me, and it's never too late to start over.
Wow.
I'm holding on to that promise that he told me of starting over, and I'm starting my life over.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. And so this is a narrative. This is a story. This is a story about how a young man goes off the rails and his efforts to redeem himself and rehabilitate himself. We're telling this story to the judge of how they end up in this moment, but more importantly, why they're not going to be back here again. And
Right.
so at that point, he was so fully committed to his sobriety, and it was not for him at that point anymore so much as to honor the legacy of his dad. And it just became such a potent, powerful, true mitigation thread. And we asked for a deferred prosecution with the prosecutor, meaning let him go through rehab and have supervision. If he's successful, dismiss everything. That's exactly what happened.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a federal case too, wasn't it?
Yep. Federal case.
Yeah. Yeah.
So amazing stuff.
They don't dismiss that many.
No, they don't. Was a wonderful and rare result, right? So, talk to me about confidentiality, because I want to see if a lawyer's listening to this. First of all, if a client is listening to this, or a potential client is listening to this, and you think this is going to be interesting or useful for you, then call your lawyer and say, I want to do this.
Or they could do it on their own and just take it to the attorney. Or
You
yeah,
could you could go
like
defense
that.
map on
Yeah.
your own. I'm sort of a control freak. I wish ideally that everything's going to go through the lawyer, but yeah, they could. But talk to me about confidentiality, because a lawyer's biggest fear obviously is that a client's going to say or do something that digs a deeper hole for
Right.
themselves. So talk to me about the confidentiality aspect of this.
Right. Yeah. And fuller appreciation of this is on in our FAQs. I think it's FAQ number 5, if I have that right, but it's early on, and it's yeah, this is state of the art confidentiality. There is no way for anyone other than with the dual verification of the username and password can get to these maps. And what is more, and that we require multiple digits, figures, and types of characters in the selection of the password. So no one can get to this except people that the client wants to get to it. And it also, the system we carefully designed so that it does not store maps. In other words, they are not in a PDF that are then in a system. The map is generated each and every time a person logs into it and clicks on create my maps, or the professional logs in because it's been put on their thing. But we've never had a security problem with it. It's state of the art, and we have absolute confidence that nobody could get at this. Now we put right on every map on the front and on every page, confidential attorney-client product. So even if somebody is carrying around a copy with them and it's accidentally left on a bus seat or something, if a prosecutor tried to use it, I think it'd be highly suspect. But that could happen with any piece of paper, right? But this one is, it is sensitive information, and we've treated it with the utmost seriousness for exactly that reason.
So one of the things that has still proven to be challenging for me is with my in-custody clients. So for out-of-custody clients, most of them are going to have access to the internet. So this is a fully online questionnaire, which hopefully already been obvious to our listeners. But, you need internet access, and you need some time to sit and do this. Now you can come back to it. It saves it. So you can do it over a period of time. But for our in-custody clients, they're not going to have unfettered access to the internet. It's very difficult, and I've tried this to kind of go in with my own computer, but I don't have access to the internet either, so it's not like I can help them fill them out. So how are you navigating those challenges for in-custody?
Yeah, great question. And we have that solved for any institution, any jail, prison, juvenile detention facility. And thank you for pointing out there's a juvenile version of this, because we have kids who are charged who are and who have traumas going on in their lives, sexual victimization, so forth, and we don't find out about that as attorneys. But in any event, we have a successful pilot program in St. Joseph County, Indiana, South Bend, my old hometown, where I practiced law for many years, where the jail, thanks to the leadership of Sheriff William Redmond and the past and current warden and assistant warden there, fabulous people. Julie Lawson was the warden there, who said, if you can show us, and we did, this is not going to create a security problem here, we would welcome this. Right? And they put it in. And the current warden, Russell Olmsted, has carried that on, and the assistant warden, Rachel Zawatowski, they've been fabulous. But they have proven that any jail, and if you think about this, I know some of your audience will know about nightmares like Rikers Island, Rikers, in where thousands of people are held virtually incognito without an opportunity to talk to their attorneys or answer questions like this. If people would get behind putting these inexpensive Chromebooks in, and that you could buy them for $100, they could put 200 of them in there for $20,000. It's a rounding error on their daily food budget over there. These folks would have a chance, inmates would have a chance to fill these out, to complete a defense map, click a button, and have that immediately, automatically on their attorney's account with us. And the attorney gets an email that your client, they give the client's name, John Smith has just placed a new defense map on your account. And that attorney also gets a notification if the client ever goes back in and makes a change, has made an amendment to their change and to their defense map. So all of this, if more attorneys would get to know it, and in particular, I'm appealing to progressive-minded public defender chiefs and assistant chiefs, the administrators of these programs, who very often themselves are charged with the administrative tasks of helping those offices work better. They don't have heavy caseloads themselves. sometimes no caseloads. Take a look at this and realize, and you can work with us. We have a helpline. We help any program, any attorney who wants assistance in implementing this. You could get defense maps for in every single one of your cases within a few days of your appointment in that case. So all those security problems are answered. All of this would be available. And can you imagine, Doug, what a difference it would make at LA County Jail and the Maricopa County Jail, where thousands of people are held, in Cook County Jail in Chicago, and even in moderate-sized towns like South Bend, and even small communities. What a difference it would make if lawyers at the very beginning had a chance to look at 10 or 12 or 14 pages of this additional information that really, I think even wealthy clients who are out don't even share with their clients, because there are just too many questions. There are too many impediments to the communication there. So thanks for asking about that. The in custody people, by the way, prisons as well for people who are seeking modification of their sentence, parole, clemency, and also post-conviction relief if there's some error in their case. These should be available in prisons, and I hope the public, I hope the defense bar would get behind putting these literally for pennies, and no financial benefit to us. We don't charge anything. They would have, by the way, this is bilingual and fully bilingual, so people can complete it in Spanish or in English. But yeah, in custody people, in my opinion, I don't know of a single thing that would make the circumstances more make it fairer for defendants than getting the defense map opportunity to as many people as possible.
There's also, you said we talk about bilingual, there's a juvenile version, but there's also an audio function, right? So in case your client doesn't read or maybe see so well that there's a kind of an automated thing that'll read these questions to the client. Is that right?
Exactly. Right next to each instruction and each question is a link to a read speaker function. And you could click, and it's available in English or in Spanish, whichever version the person is on, and the question is actually read to the person. So, we think that well over 95% of people can complete these. And by the way, the clients appreciate it. I imagine this has been your experience as well, but I've had lawyers say, my gosh, what this does for my relationship with my client. They'll say, thank you for sending. Nobody cared this enough in my life to ask these things. And it's also, by the way, I encourage lawyers to read the map before their next appointment with the client. Don't be reading it in front of the client. Give it a good reading. Even if you just have 20 minutes, you can give it a good reading and mark some things and build that relationship with the client. If you're able to say, Doug, wow, you've been through a lot. I was touched by what you wrote about something. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about it. That client, I'm sure, like that client in that federal case you were talking about, that serious assault case, and after you shared it, now it comes back to me a little bit about that. What that does for that relationship is just magical. That to feel that lawyer actually cared, that the client is not just a number, not just a file, not just another headache to the professional. Amazing.
Yep. Yeah, that is my process when I start a case. So first of all, when does mitigation start? It's the very beginning of the case. That's another kind of common pitfall that we fall into, which is, well, let me just get through the plea and get a sentencing date set, and then we'll figure out what our mitigation is. Right. No, I do this at the very beginning of a case, no matter which way. Well, let's face it, 95 or more % of these cases are going to settle by a plea. So odds are good you're getting there anyway. But very beginning, and I will then take that map. I'll go through it on my own, and exactly like you said, I'll say, okay, man, I'd love to hear more about this. Let's talk about this. This is a jumping off point for this conversation, and I will go through it, and I'll come out of that with pages and pages of notes that are just layers and layers of depth, that we've gone even deeper from the map. So I think I don't know why anybody doesn't do this. There's like zero downside to
Yeah.
it.
I,
So hopefully
I,
we
wa- I want to mention one other thing
yeah.
that I know you do. It and it bears on this question about getting this information early, and especially with COVID and people being locked up in jails and the lawyers either not being able to go there or not wanting to go there. We have when I first presented about this to the St. Joseph County Jail, the warden, Julie Lawson, when I was about 10 minutes into explaining it, said, Mr. Asham, may I interrupt something? And this was on a Zoom call with a lot of their staff. She said, may I interrupt to say something? I said, well, of course. And she said, do you know that we have inmates in this jail who have been here 2 years waiting for a trial and have seen their lawyer once? And
Mm.
that was 2 years ago. They had a meeting and have had no contact with. But competent representation, as you know, in your magnificent work in mitigation and talking to lawyers about this, requires getting information early and using it. And one of the reasons for that, just one reason, is what I call the difference between static and dynamic mitigation. There's static factors that you can't do anything about. Your client was or wasn't young when this happened, 17 years old, did or didn't have a prior criminal record and juvenile record. Okay, if that's true, that's an unchangeable thing. That's static. But there's dynamic mitigation. That is, what is the client going to be doing while this case is pending that is going to show that he or she is in a better position to ask for a dismissal, ask for the best plea agreement, that the fairest plea agreement in the circumstance, and ask for the most reasonable, lenient sentences in the circumstances. And as you know, there's so much that can be done, and wealthy people have this. Wealthy people have attorneys and sometimes co-professional, allied professionals, mitigation specialists, or social workers, or whatever, paralegals, talking to them from the beginning, and they have this year or year and a half when the case is pending to develop. Here's our response to being to deserve a dismissal, deserve a better plea agreement, deserve a better sentence, and poor people don't. The good mitigation needs to be developed, as you say, from day one, not what we have. It's not always the lawyer's fault. Very often it isn't. These public defenders, as you know, Doug, in many systems, they have caseloads that, as one colleague of mine calls them, they're hydraulic. They're almost like somebody is oppressing them. They don't have time to do this. Here's a tool that collects information. It shouldn't be a substitute for spending time with the client, but it actually covers things that in that Q&A won't come up. And it's an opportunity to do it early and to make use of it when it's going to be the most effective.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you envision in a public defender office. Now, I was a public defender for many, many years, most of the years of my lawyering, so I know that we can be under resourced and have very high caseloads, and a lot of times they're moving super, super fast. So ideally, if you could have one person in an office responsible for spearheading the map and getting that done at the beginning of the case, then essentially the minute the file comes to the defender's desk, the front page of that file could be the defense map. So can you imagine the head start you could get when you already have a very decent handle on all these moving pieces of a person's mitigation picture? I mean, and the other thing I want to say is, for lawyers, I think one of the things we get real discouraged about is when we take a first glance at a case and say, I just don't know what I can do for this person.
Right.
And one of the ways that happens the most is when a person's been in trouble a lot and they're back again. Right. And it's like, oh man, the judge is going to be mad. I don't know how I'm going to, with a straight face, argue that they're not going to do this again. And the question is, well, have you ever done this work? Because a lot of times they've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different cases, and nobody ever figured out they've got a mental health condition. Nobody ever figured out how many ACE adverse childhood experiences they had. That, and the issue is not, oh, poor me, let's feel sorry for my client, cut him a break. No, 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 no. The issue is you start to put the pieces of the story together about how a person ends up at this moment in time and
Right.
what you can do to change course. That's never been done before.
Exactly. Exactly. There's a
So,
wonderful essay by a psychiatrist by the name of Sandra Bloom called Creating Sanctuary, where she talks about, and she works a lot with, in the field of female inmates. I've done a lot of uh, uh, pro bono work for women in our women's prison in Indiana. And it's amazing the level of undiagnosed sexual abuse that they've studied. It's amazing the ways in which sometimes that gets acted out as gravitating toward other abusive men, and how they were drawn into violent behavior, serious drug dealing for somebody else, and so forth, because of that victimization and that cascading set of losses that comes with that. But Dr. Bloom puts it very well, and I think I have this almost word for word. She said, if your first question is, what did you do, instead of what happened to you, then you are harming both the individual and society. If you want to help this individual and society, we need to be asking more of, what has happened to you? What happened to you? And Defense Map is this way that people can share what happened to them and talk about things that it might be very, very difficult to share face to face. And by the way, no attorney is everybody's cup of tea. I can go in as a 70-year-old white-haired guy and remind a client of exactly the step grandfather who molested them. I don't have any way of controlling that.
mm-hmm.
But here's a tool where people can be alone, be in this safe environment, and work in that privacy, and basically a conversation with themselves about what's going on. But yes, if all we ever ask is, what did you do, instead of also what happened to you, it's a shame. And I hope that, you're I don't know how many talks you've given. I've seen many myself about the 3 R's of mitigation and all of them to the defense bar. But I don't know. I hope the day isn't far off when we'll be looking back and say, do you believe that we actually used to not know which of our clients had been molested? Do you believe that I hope there's a generation of lawyers, maybe they're in law school right now, maybe they're in high school, maybe they're in junior high, but who by the time they become attorneys say, what, you didn't know these things? How could
Mm-hmm.
you have been standing up
Mm-hmm.
there speaking up for this person? So I hope that day is coming, and to the extent Defense Map can be a part of that, it would be extraordinarily gratifying. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Our system is kind of famous for stripping the humanity out of the process and reducing our client to their worst moment. What did you do? You're charging a paper, you're a stack of paper and a file, and our job is to disrupt that and to reveal the humanity. And
Correct.
Defense Map is an amazing tool for doing that. So I just wanted to thank you for doing this. It's free. I mean, it's free, everybody. Like, there's no reason you shouldn't be doing this. Just give it a try one time, and I guarantee you're going to get hooked just like I did. So I always like to give my guests the last word. Did I forget something that you really wanted to talk about or let the listeners know about before we wrap up?
Well, I'd go back to that gap of resources. 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court said, in a unanimous decision, there has to be a balance of forces in discovery between the defense and the prosecution and police on the one hand, the defense. That is still good law, Wardius versus Oregon. And yet, what is really going, does the defense in America have anything like There were 8 police departments in the jurisdiction I used to practice in: the state police, the South Bend police, Mishawaka police, Rose police, the county police, the state police. What did we have? We had like nothing. Here we're asking, and this is part of my appeal to prisons and jails. This is a safe thing. And as you point out, it isn't just to give fair defense and due process, which is important in and of itself, but doesn't society have a stake in having these issues addressed, so that by the defense, and then give this person a chance to work with their attorney on a mitigation plan to address issues in their lives? It's a win-win for everyone. So thanks for your work, Doug, and thanks for the chance to be with you.
Thank you, Charlie. So if anybody is, hopefully everybody is curious to know more about defense maps, go to defensemap.com. And if you and you can sign up and check out, do the facts, see a sample map, watch videos. There's every piece of information you need is up there. If you're trying to get this inside a facility and into a jail, then reach out to Charlie Asher, and he can help with that, I think. And
we have a helpline they could click, and we're able to be back to people usually within the next day. And FAQ number 1, I might say, is a pretty good introduction. We have a 1-hour track introduction and a 10-minute track introduction, and professionals can use either one. And individuals or people with family members who have a charge, they can give it a try and bring their defense map to the attorney, mail it to them, email it to them, and ask, why doesn't my jail, why doesn't my son or daughter's prison have this available to them? They really should. Thanks again.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you so much. Good luck with all of it.
You too, my friend. Bye now.
That's it for today, but before we go, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to you, the listener, for spending time with us today getting set for sentencing. Whether you're a lawyer, someone who could use the help, or maybe you're just a true crime buff who loves the inside scoop on how this whole thing works, I am so glad you're here, and I hope you keep listening. If you like the podcast, please do me a favor. Spread the word about Set for Sentencing and give us a rating and review on the iTunes podcast platform. It would really help. Last but not least, if you're interested in knowing more about what I do, mitigation videos, case consults, live teaching, on-demand educational content, books, articles, all of it, please visit www.dougpassonlaw.com. I'm Doug Passon. Until next time, hang in there. Wait a minute, that's a stupid way to sign off a podcast about sentencing. Hang in there. What's the matter with you, man? I guess they call that gallows humor. Sorry. All right. Well, I will see you next time on Set for Sentencing. Bye-bye.